Welcome back to the Joe Gaither Show on CanesCentral. I am Joe Gaither. You guys are watching us on the Miami Hurricanes on SI YouTube channel. Hanging out with us on my own social media machines at Joe Gaither6 on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Or you're listening to the Joe Gaither Show on CanesCentral on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon. Had a little bit of a wild July dealing with SEC Media Days. So that's where we were last week, where we missed you guys. But now we have come and gone with ACC Media Days, and it's my pleasure to be joined by Justice Sandel, our site lead for Miami Hurricanes on SI. You guys are following him at Justice_News5. He had a very, very busy week following ACC Media Days. So, Justice, how was it covering the Hurricanes this past week in Charlotte?
It was fun. It was exciting. You got to learn a lot more about the players, some things that you already knew, but continuing and growing from what they've given us and showing the amount of confidence that they have for this season. It was a great time.
We heard from Mario Cristobal. We heard from Cam Ward. We heard from Jalen Rivers and Francisco Mauinoga, the defensive line, or the linebacker. So you had a kind of a star-studded cast for the Miami Hurricanes. I want to get your takeaways from each of the three players, and then we'll talk about things that Mario Cristobal said during his time at ACC Media Days. Why don't we start with Jalen Rivers? Offensive lineman gets to go to Media Days and represent the Hurricanes. What did you hear from Jalen Rivers, and really what was your biggest takeaway from his time at the podium?
The big thing that all three of these guys have is their leadership and just the ability to speak. Their leadership just showed all over the place. Their confidence in what they have in the program and what they're building. But for specifically Jalen Rivers, I think that the way that he talks about the offensive line, the continuality that is coming back, they're returning 3 starters and adding in 2 new players. He's talking about how even with the new players, there's a consistency and there's a thing that they want out of the offensive line. They want to be physical, they want to be tough, and that's what they need out of the offensive line. He knows that there was a struggles a couple years ago before Mario Cristobal came. Now that Mario Cristobal came and they're working together with the offensive line and the growth and continuation of it, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Well, Jalen Rivers got up there and he talked about really the offensive lines in the past. He's talked about really going up against the strong defensive line. Excuse me. And we talked about the Miami defensive line, I believe, on our last show together. Let's tie two things together that both Jalen Rivers had to say and Mario Cristobal talked about, at least it may not have been at the main media podium, but off to the side on ACC Network. They talked a lot about the presence of the Miami alumni. Yeah. They talked a lot about how the alumni have really been kind of pouring into them and kind of giving them a, hey, this is what it means to be a Miami Hurricane. So I'm just going to ask you about Jalen Rivers and really what he had to say about these Miami alums and really your takeaway for the Miami Hurricanes being really, really obviously Mario Cristobal playing there, but really utilizing his connection to former players at his time, obviously, as an alumni, enhancing that and making that a big part of his program.
I know one thing that was said was that when the alumni came, I believe it was Michael Irvin, he said, if you're not going to do anything for us, we don't want you here. And that's what Jalen Rivers had the same sentiment. He said that they were teaching them a lot and learning a lot from those alumni because there's the expectation this year that they can go all the way. And that's what the alumni have been saying. That's what many ACC panelists and analysts have been saying over the past number of days, especially at ACC Media Day. Those alumni and what that's bringing in and allowing the players to be, especially with Jalen Rivers and his status. Mario Cristobal already said he was a pro. If he wanted to leave, he could have. But with the return of what he's going to do and being able to do what he needs to do, I think that with the alumni having that extra pressure per se, but I think it'll be an extra boost for what they need to do. I think it'll be great for them.
All right, let's keep it going with Justice Sandel from Miami Hurricanes on SI. Let's talk about Francisco Mauinoga. He spent some time. He's the only defensive player to go for Miami to ACC Media Days. Obviously, only taking 3 players, so you got to go 2 for one side of the ball and 1 on the other side of the ball. But Mauinoga had his. Oh, sorry. I think I was listening for that noise. I didn't hear that. Mauinoga had his time at the podium. What did you hear from the linebacker?
Well, a funny thing is that I heard was him saying that he used to play quarterback and now he just doesn't have any sympathy for hitting quarterbacks anymore. So that was the funniest thing. But the biggest thing that I picked up was that he's such a family guy, and that was one of the main reasons he returned. He could have been drafted in the NFL last year too. He's spent time at Washington with Cam Ward with those earlier years, but coming over, staying. Most of his family now lives in that Miami area, playing with his younger brother. Having that family connection and knowing that Mario Cristobal is building that family type of role and he wants a family out of his program. That was the biggest takeaway from me.
Well, I want you to keep going with that theme. The
Okay.
connections that Minoga had, obviously, with his brother, but also with Cam Ward. And I just wonder, really, if that was a point of focus for Mario Cristobal to say, okay, we're going to get guys who have a big, who have a lot of connections from different areas and bring them all into Miami. Just what do you make of Minoga? Do you think he had a big influence on Cam Ward coming from Washington State to Miami? And then obviously he talked about his time at Washington State and being American Samoan. What made Miami really the home base destination for him?
I think it was because of what Mario Cristobal provides. Like you said, a big thing for Mario Cristobal is family. He constantly mentioned that throughout all the programs that he was a part of. Family is one of the biggest things. That's what gets a lot of recruits to come to them because family is such a big importance. And I think that having that family bond with your coaching and all your coaching staff and with your players, I think that's the biggest thing and why, for instance, Maui Noah returned. And having that with Cam Ward, knowing that he's played with him, he's been through the battles with him, the ups and downs, and knowing that if you come over to the program, if you come over to Miami, you're going to have a great expectation of what we want. We want your leadership. We want your tangibles, your intangibles. We want all of that you bring over that you had in Washington State. Knowing that doing that together with what we have, it'll be a great deal.
All right, and obviously the headliner was Cam Ward, the quarterback. We've talked about him a lot on this show already. I'll just open the table up to you before I ask you something specific about Cam Ward. What did you hear from the signal caller?
Confidence. It wasn't even what he said, it was just the way he presented himself. That was the biggest thing that was taken away. His confidence, his presence, the way that he spoke, everything about him, it signaled that he was the guy. He is the quarterback. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks to come out of this draft class. That's all that you picked up from him is that no matter what he's doing, like I think one of the things that he said was that I know that a bad play might happen, but I can't keep that bad play in mind. Just go on to the next thing. I like that mindset out of a quarterback, knowing that things happen on the football field. You might throw a bad pass, you might fumble the ball. He was sacked a bunch of times last season compared to what hopefully he's not sacked that many times this season with the offensive line that the Hurricanes have. But that confidence that he has in himself, his teammates, it's starting to radiate throughout the program, and that's why there's that expectation just continues to rise.
All right, so Cam Ward was up there. I think it was off to the side on ACC Network, and he talked about really his journey from being a no-star recruit, going to Washington State. Now he's at Miami. How do you think that his journey, being under recruited and then going to look, Washington State's not a football power, but performing very well at Washington State. How do you think that his journey has prepared him to really this moment where this year at Miami, it's almost not make or break, but it's pretty close to make or break. It's everything's lined up. How do you think that his journey has prepared him to maximize this season with the Miami Hurricanes?
I don't think you can have success without having those difficult struggles and journeys that he's had. Started at a JUCO, under recruited, then got the chance at Washington State and showed that he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Now he's on this big stage for Miami. Washington State's a good stage, but it's Miami. That's a bigger stage. That's the bigger chance, and especially with the expectation that they have now. One of the main things that his grit and grind. That is one of the many things. He's always constantly working. He's always constantly doing what he needs to do. Mario Cristobal said he's one of the first people in the room, and he's going to be one of the last people in the room. Facilities wise, he's going to be there early in the morning, leave late at night. He's always helping other people out. I think that with knowing that he had to grind from that unknown to getting to where he is now, I think that it's great leadership wise. I think that's great personal because of what he's able to do. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Having that mentality of nobody's going to believe in me, nobody actually has that faith that I can do what I need to do, and getting to this stage and hopefully and willingly prove that he is who he says he is. I think that's what it means to him.
All right, we're talking to Justice Sando from CanesCentral Miami Hurricanes on SI. I'd like to ask you about the relationship between Cam Ward and Mario Cristobal. Obviously, it is a new, kind of a newly formed relationship, but it seems from way outside my, from through the computer screen, like those two guys really have each other's back. What did you take away from really their time on Wednesday? All the different outlets that they were able to talk to, really how much that they are really who they have to rely on. Obviously, Cam Ward was selected by Mario Cristobal. He selected Mario Cristobal. It's basically on them to make this season work.
Okay, Mario Cristobal said it plenty of times. Alpha leader. That is the key word that he said about Cam Ward. That will be what they both have. He's an alpha leader there. Cam Ward's also an alpha leader. And Mario Cristobal, that is. Both of them having that mindset of we know what we need to do. We know what needs to be done. Having that alpha leader mindset is, I'm not trying to be like cliche or anything, you know, how people now are like, oh, you have to be an alpha leader, this, that, and the third. But it's having that mindset that you know what needs to be done. They know what needs to be done. They know the expectations that they have on this season. They know that they need to perform at a certain level, that their connection has to be the focal point of everything. They have a great connection right now. You can hear it in the way that they talk about each other. They love each other. It's like I said, it's a family. They have that family bond together back and forth between each other. So I think that it will be predicated on them, the 1-2 connection between the head coach and the quarterback. I think that what Cam Ward said about Mario Cristobal, him being a great leader, him being a great friend, and everything that leads up to them performing. And when they get into fall camp and then to that first game in the Swamp against the Florida Gators, I think that it's going to build up from there.
What did you learn about these three players? Either one thing or something from all of them. What did you learn from these players' time in Charlotte?
I learned that they believe in themselves. And I think that's one of the things that people have started to doubt about the Hurricanes. Do they believe in themselves? Do they believe in what they're able to do? That confidence that I talked about earlier, it's all over the place. Everybody believes in them. And even though I think one of the correspondents said that everybody's believed in Miami for 20 years, but what have they done? Nothing. This is the actual year that everybody can put some stock in Miami, and they might actually get a reward. They might get the earnings from what they build up in the stock. I think that confidence is the main thing that I learned from this team at my time. But I think that confidence, the family bond, I think those are the biggest takeaways that I learned.
All right, let's take it into Mario Cristobal and his time specifically. What was anything about his time in front of the Charlotte media that stood out to you that, okay, what has changed in Mario Cristobal, or what's an area where he's grown to you? What stood out to you during his time at ACC Media Days?
Well, I remember when you asked me that question about what would I would say to Mario Cristobal whenever I got the chance when I was up there. Somebody took the question and he said, this is a quote, "We've seen a lot of great Miami teams over the years. Can you tell us what's the difference about this year's Hurricanes team?" And that was the question that I asked when you had asked me. Somebody took it. It happens. That's the life of the media. But what Mario Cristobal said is that it's progression. And that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from what is going on. He is progressing continually year after year. It made me believe in him more. He's a great speaker. He's a great motivator. He's a head coach. He's a better speaker than most of the other coaches that I saw up there. Genuinely. So I think that being that motivator, being that speaker, being the great leader that he is, and knowing that this is a progressing progress going through this whole entire system, he finally has the players that he wants. He also mentioned about the transfer portal and how it's a melting pot, pretty much. It's a great blend between young talent and older talent. He's great with recruiting. He's going to have those young recruits in. He's going to have those 5-star, 4-star freshmen, sophomores coming in, but also have that integral experience coming from transfer players like the juniors, seniors, and redshirt junior seniors, graduate students coming in, having that perfect blend so everybody can learn from each other. Freshmen have experience. They can learn from the top players that played in their conference, like Tyler Barron and Ruben Bain, for example. Ruben Bain played fantastic last season, but there's so many things you can learn from an SEC player coming in and knowing what he's learned. So I think that those are my main takeaways from Mario Cristobal, knowing that this is a progression, especially with how the new college system is now with NIL and how everything's going. It's a progression. And him saying that it's a progression shows that this program's in the right direction.
All right, did your expectations for this season? Admittedly, we've gone over them a couple different times, and you think the expectations are very high. Did the expectations for you, Justice Sandal, change after what you heard on Wednesday?
No, I think they're the same. I think that there's still those question marks you have. Of course, you listen and you're there and you're seeing what he's saying and you're believing what he's saying, but knowing in the back of your mind that those things did happen last year, those coaching errors. Hopefully, that those coaching errors can be cleaned up. And going into this season, I still have the same expectations, 10-2. That's still my expectation. I still think that's what's going to happen. I say I do believe in them more. I believe in them more as the writer that I am. I think that the leadership that was shown on display from every player that was up there compared to how every other player was when I was watching, I think that they showed that their leadership was better than, and their confidence was a lot higher, and it was more on display compared to other players that were there. So I think that with that, same expectations, but a lot can happen over the next few months.
The last question that Mario Cristobal got in the main media room was about those expectations and really about it was a little bit convoluted, the wording of the question, but essentially the reporter was trying to say, okay, you spent all these years. This is now your third year where you've been kind of going into a season building, and it seems like the pieces are in place. He really asked, okay, now that the excuses are eliminated, is there a pressure to perform? Do you think that the players feel, and Mario Cristobal feels, pressure to go out and have a 10-2 or ACC championship competing season this season?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. The players that they've accumulated over this period to get the top players that they have in that program, there is pressure on them to be who they need to be. Now, I think there's pressure with every coach and quarterback, especially with the tandem of what they have. But the pressure should be on them. Last season, you saw there were flashes of what the team was capable of, but shortcomings, different quarterback situations, having a quarterback carousel in the middle of the season just doesn't help. Now you have that solidified person at quarterback. You have a solidified offensive line. You have a solidified defensive line. You're bringing back 79% of your offensive production from last season, and you're implementing one of the top 5 quarterbacks from last season statistically. I think that with that, the pressure will be on them, and I think they'll live up to that pressure and expectation.
All right, let's talk about outside of the Miami Hurricanes. What was the biggest storyline that stood out to you? Was it Florida State Clemson conference realignment, or was there something else from ACC Media Days that you thought, oh, that's going to carry us through the entire year?
I think Commissioner Jim Phillips, his opening statement, loudly, boldly walked in. He was just trying to flex on everybody. This is what we do. This is what we do. Football wise, might not get as many like national championships and things like that, but soccer, gymnastics, tennis, golf, all the other sports that people might not talk about, just throwing them out there. Oh, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. I think that was one of the biggest things. And also him talking about how Clemson and Florida State are potentially leaving. He understands that it's going to be a very rocky relationship. And he talked about the relationship that they have with each other, that he wanted to keep it a professional one, but he knows how the game goes. If it gets evil, if it gets dirty, he doesn't want to go that way. If it goes that way, he's a commissioner. He's a commissioner. He's going to do what he needs to do. But I think that was one of the biggest takeaways, is that he's confident in what him and his staff is able to do, especially coming in with what the new ACC is, and especially with how Florida State and Clemson are trying to exit their way out. But I don't think that'll truly happen. So.
Well, Justice, how are you going to spend your last 3 or 4 days until Miami Hurricanes football camp opens up? You got a couple more days until it actually gets going. But what will you be working on, and what will you be doing to enjoy your last few days of summer?
Well, I just got done with an interview with one of the Miami's baseball's new pitcher, Rob Evans. I'm working on a story with that. He was a great conversation, great kid, a transfer coming from Georgia State. He was likely to be one of the starters on the weekend if everything goes according to plan. I'm working on that right now. I got a couple of different position stories coming up too, just if you want a deep dive going into the quarterback room, running back room, all those specific rooms that you might have interest in. And that's pretty much it right now, just gearing up for fall camp and gearing up for the season.
It'll be here before we know it, and you guys can all follow it at Miami Hurricanes on SI. Make sure you follow Justice Sando at Justice_News5 and follow them on the Twitter machine at CanesCentral SI. Justice, thanks for your time, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's Justice Sandal joining us. And that is our ACC Media Days kind of wrap up for this weekend. And now we're all ready for the season. We're going to be back with another edition of the Joe Gaither Show on CanesCentral next week as we get closer and closer to the season opener. This has been the Joe Gaither Show on CanesCentral. You listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on Amazon. We'll be back with next week for another edition on the Miami Hurricanes on SI.